Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast today from Corvallis, I think that's correct
Yes.
pronunciation, Oregon in the USA, Anastasia Lipske, who's a speaker and a podcast booking agent. She's a branding consultant for speakers and podcast guests, and she's founder of Access Speakers, a speaker and podcast booking agency where she's personally booked over 1,700 engagements for her clients, which is pretty amazing. And I'm looking forward to learning how she's done that and also speaking about podcasting mainly today, because this is a very special episode, our episode 600. So welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Anastasia. It's
Thank you. It is such an honor to be on number 600. There's something about that number that just sounds so magnificent. And you know what? That is no easy feat in the podcasting world. This is so hats off to you, because pod fade, I don't know, how familiar your listeners are with that, but it's a term that we will use in the industry, and that's really podcast fading away. So it's worse than restaurants. They always talk about restaurants that first 6 months, and there are so many people that start a podcast and they don't keep it up because it is a lot of work. So thank you to you and all those who, like you, provide a platform for all of us to learn and be inspired. And for those of us that do this as a business, it's also a way we can get our voice out there. So if we didn't have people like you, we'd be sitting at home just doing our thing, right?
It was
Facebook ads.
Yeah, that's right. It was when I first started, little did I know that I'd be doing episode 600 one day, and it was just one of those things. And let's see how this goes. And I found that I really enjoyed it, and one thing led to another. But a lot of it is really just being consistent and building up a good system. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that today. Now, I did want to give a shout out to Rusty Gaylard. He was our guest on episode 411, so quite a way back, of the Innova.Buzz podcast, and he introduced us. And so big hello to Rusty.
Yes, Rusty's one of my clients, and he is an amazing speaker and podcast guest. And if anybody is interested in him, let me know, because he's just a very unique individual who has an awesome story of coming from being the former worldwide director of finance for Apple and having his own business to help people find that work-life balance and pull in leadership. It's pretty impressive. So anyway, I don't mean to start a little infomercial for Rusty, but I can't help but say something wonderful about him, because he is, a remarkable individual. And again, you have him on your show. It gives people an opportunity to, learn from him, but also learn from you each and every time you have a guest that you interact with. So it just speaks to the power of podcasting.
That's right. Yes. And also for me, it's been one of those things where it's just grown my network exponentially. And so I get to meet wonderful people like you and like Rusty.
Thank you.
So check out episode 411, learn more about Rusty there. And as Anastasia said, if you're interested in speaking more with him, she can facilitate that.
Beautiful.
Now, before we kind of get into all things podcasting, because that's what I want to focus on today, reflecting back on 600 episodes, but from your perspective, I guess, learning about what you've learned about booking so many people as guests and what best practice is, I guess. What's the impact you're making in the world today, Anastasia?
You're talking about me personally, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things I love about what I do, is that I believe in the message of every client that I represent. So if I believe in their message and I can be a part of them getting their message out to more people, that's how I can have my impact. So whether it be someone who is helping with business growth, if it is someone who's talking about abuse and how to have hope and healing through that, or it's I have a doctor on my in my portfolio that talks about things that can benefit people to learn. Like, there's so many. I have a wide variety of people, and every single one of them make a difference. And so they can get in front of more people. And so that ripple effect that I get to be a part of, and it's part of why I do this. Like I know that I will probably not be working full time for the rest of my life. I hope. I have some years ahead of me of just being on the ground playing with my granddaughters. But meanwhile, I sure love what I do. And when that day comes that I might want to cut back, I really am worried, like, who else is going to do this for me? I need someone else to pick up the baton and carry it forth because I want these messages out there. They make a difference. So
yeah, that's wonderful. And as you're speaking there, I thought it must be fabulous if you're getting so vested and you want to believe in all of your clients' message and vision and what they're about, what they're aiming to do. It must be wonderful because in doing that, you're learning about so many different areas.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is one of the things that I love about podcasting. I'm learning about so many different areas.
Oh my gosh, 600 episodes. You could write a book just on everything you've learned from all these different people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I sort of keep thinking I've got to go back and put all this together, and certainly there's probably several books there.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
All right. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning, I guess. And I know your story is an interesting one. You kind of ended up, or you started off in the travel industry and ended up building the speaking agency, and then COVID kind of suddenly put a stop to all the speaking engagements, and you decided, well, we'll pivot and we'll do podcasts.
Right.
Why is speaking and podcasting, I guess, such a great tool to build visibility for people that have a message that they want to get out into the world?
Well, in particular, if you have a service-based business, but even if it's not, even if it's a tangible business, you have the opportunity to, through education, through inspiration, in essence, create sample advertising. It's sample marketing, which is the most effective that's out there. You know, if you've got a brand new laundry soap, if you can afford to get that laundry soap out in the hands of people to try, if it's a good product, they're far more likely to actually buy it. Same thing with you speaking and being a guest on podcasts, is that people get a taste for who you are and what you're about. And people either are going to resonate with you or not. So we can never, ever think, like right now, there may be people who they're listening to me and they're just like not feeling it, or there's something about my voice that they don't like, or who knows what it might be. But other people, they might resonate with me. There's something about how I'm saying it and what I'm saying it. The people who are listening to your show, each and every single time you come out with an episode, your fan base, the people that you've built this community around, is because they like you. It's not just your guests, it's you also, because they can listen to guests on other shows. So it's relational marketing. And so even if you're selling widgets, if you can go out and you can educate people about why they need widgets in their lives, if you do it well, you do it with integrity, you do it to bless the audience, not to pitch, air quote, yourself, right? If you do it from that viewpoint, there are always going to be people that will resonate with you and they're going to want to buy. It's that know, like, and trust factor that's often spoken of, where people will, support and buy services and products from people that they connect with. So what better way than through the voice? What better way through personal connection, either coming through somebody's phone, their computer screen, or you're in a meeting or at a conference, them on a stage or a platform. It's powerful. It's really powerful, but it does need to be done right. And that's a very important part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll come back to that in a moment and best practice, because I think there's a lot there for us to explore. I love that you talked about serving the audience rather than pitching, and I think I suspect that it's probably one of the things you see as a big mistake, that many people make. They kind of get on these things
yes.
and they pitch. And I've had people in those 600 episodes that have kind of done that. I think I've managed to steer them back onto the straight and narrow in
Yeah.
most of those episodes. But yeah, and our onboarding process before we even take guests on board, I kind of have filtered out people that I felt they were just, it was all about them and presenting themselves rather
Absolutely.
than what can they contribute to the podcast and to my audience.
Exactly. Yep.
When I've decided, and like you say, you don't always resonate with everybody, and there were occasions there that I thought, well, I think they're just going to pitch, and I won't be able to change that, so I'll politely decline them as guests.
Well, I'll tell you, the speaker world is where it is abused far more than in the podcasting world. The podcasting world, the host does have the ability to steer away. They have the ability to edit. They also have the ability to not air the episode.
Yeah.
So you have a little control. You do not have control over a speaker who has
On a
started
live-
a presentation in a meeting.
Hmm.
And there are far too many people that have abused that platform and turned it into an infomercial. And it's really unfortunate because it's made it hard for the people who don't do it. And at my agency, it's a very unique model. Like there was only one other person that had a similar business model, and she actually closed her doors in the pandemic. But the people that we would reach out to, because we book people who speak for free to grow their business. It's a different model than a traditional agency where they book you a paid speaking engagement, and then they take, say, 20 to 30% of that honorarium or that speaker fee. That's how they make their money. Our agency where I started was honestly booking people with Rotary clubs. And there's a whole, we don't have to get into the whole long story, but where it started, like, I never intended to do this, but when my sustainable farmer friend asked me to book her, with Rotary clubs or groups or whatever I could find, just so she could talk about her farm, and she didn't know where to start, that's where this all began. So when I started reaching out, say, to Rotary clubs, they didn't know what to do with me because they'd never been approached by an agency before. Because there's no speaker budget. So all these groups and organizations, I had to build a trust relationship with them because they were worried that if they work with me, then that must mean that my clients, if they're paying me to book them on that stage, then they're going to pitch their stuff. And I can't tell you how much time I've had to spend trying to convince them, like, no, my clients don't do that. That happens, I know. But if my clients did that, that would be the kiss of death to my business, because you would never book another client with me. And so why would I put someone on your stage that you're not going to say, who else do you have? So, but it took me a long time to break through that because people do abuse that. In the podcasting guesting world, I know seeding, right? So for those of your listeners who might not be very familiar with it, the idea of seeding a conversation, like you could, in this conversation with me, I could continually, in my responses to you, be answering your questions, but I could be talking about my client that had this success, this client that I did this with, this Q&A that I do on my monthly basis. Like, I can be throwing that in the entire time. There is value to that within reason. And I think what happens is that it's about the intent. It's this genuine, you, Jurgen, would be able to tell if I'm really just answering the question and it makes sense. I'm adding value to that answer by saying that, as opposed to, I got to squeeze in one more seed so that people know that I do this monthly Q&A, which now it might sound like I'm seeding my monthly Q&A. I feel like I'm in an infinity mirror right now, but I'm just using that as an example that people can abuse. So yeah, it does get hard. So
yeah, well, one of the things that certainly struck me, I mean, as a podcast host, I get lots of pitches, and I know you don't like the word pitches, but I intentionally use the word pitch in this context.
I understand.
Because so I get lots of pitches. So I'll get a pitch where a person wants to be a guest on the podcast, and they send me an email and they essentially pitch me, tell me why they want to be on the podcast. Then I get agencies saying you should have John Smith on your podcast because, and they tell me about John Smith. Now, when you first contacted me with a guest, we'd already spoken by email a couple of times because Rusty had introduced us.
Right.
And then you asked me, what sort of guests do you have on the podcast? And then you introduced Nancy Geary, who's actually, I think she's going to be the next.
She just came out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's. Oh, she just came out. Okay, so
yeah.
I'm not on top of it. Okay, so she's already published. Listen to her episode.
Well, you did the interview, and it's coming out. I think it's like, I don't know, number 603 or something like that. I can't remember.
Okay,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but you had your interview, and that's it. All started because I did suggest.
So she will be published shortly then.
Yeah.
And so what struck me was the care with which you took to actually ensure that Nancy was a good fit for our podcast, and also the care that you took in your, and I'll call it a pitch, but it was more about here's the value that Nancy will bring to your podcast, and here's why I think she will be a great guest, which I thought really stood out because a lot of the pitches are, here's John Smith. John Smith's done all these wonderful things, and John Smith can talk about X, Y, and Z, and you should have him on your podcast. And then it's really up to me to kind of draw the conclusion of, well, what value will John Smith add to my podcast? Because they don't necessarily talk about that. Now, it may be inherent in the pitch, or it may not be, but it's kind of like coming from a completely different angle. So I guess the question coming out of that is, talk to us a little bit about best practice for an agency that wants to, or individuals that want to book themselves or land themselves as guests on a podcast.
Thank you. And I appreciate you acknowledging that, because I do feel it does differ. We differ ourselves from a lot of agencies that are out there because of that reason. Kind of like that thing I was talking about, how it was hard for me as a speaker agent to get groups to work with me for the first time because they were worried that my clients would abuse the platform. I run into a similar problem with running my clients by hosts or producers of shows, etc., who the moment they know that it is, coming from an agency, they're like, nope, we're not interested, because there are so many agencies that have abused the platform, or not. They've abused the pitch process, if you will. And so I'm continually saying, but we're different. In fact, you and I, we had this conversation. Do you know that very day I reached out to a show, and I had a client that I am certain would be of value from everything that I checked out. My client checked it out, and they declined because we were an agency. And I even said, oh my gosh, that's so funny. In fact, it's an Australian company. And I was like, you won't believe this. I was just talking with an Australian podcaster today about this very thing. And here's what we do that's different. Please, will you consider making an exception? I get it. So I do want to impress upon your listeners, just, here's the thing. When we propose, our clients to a show, or myself, if I'm proposing myself as a guest to a potential show, it's important that we remember that at the end of the day, the host, all they want to do is grow their show. All they want to do is get a stronger show, a stronger community through more subscriptions, more downloads, more likes, more ratings and reviews, like all of this. That's what you need. You need to increase your visibility so that you can get more people part of your Flywheel Nation, get people to, hire you, like learn about you and your products, services, and your community that you offer. You want to get that out to more people. So anything that a potential guest can do to help you with that, all the better. Because you know, if again, it comes back to that blessing thing. Just if you think about it, like, how can I be of value to that host? How can I be of value to the listeners? And it starts, by the way, with making certain that you are a good fit for the show. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for someone who's not aligned with the show to even pitch themselves or run themselves by that show when there isn't alignment right from the get-go. So there are a lot of people that do the spray and pray model. I've known of an agency that they boast the fact that they can send a template out for their clients out to 6,000 shows in one fell swoop. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? So we're different. We run the show by our client first. So I went to Nancy. I shared everything that I had about your show, and I told her why I thought she would be a good fit for it. But I want her to listen. I want her to review all the content that you give us. And you, by the way, do a great job of giving a lot of content. There are a lot of shows that it's really hard to know what that host is looking for, who their demographics are, like what the audience, we don't really know. And we can look at all the previous guests. I mean, this is what I do every day. I do this every day. I am looking at shows and I'm trying to determine what they're about, who their audience is, and if I have anyone in my portfolio that can be of value to that audience. And it's not easy because some people do not make it easy.
Yeah.
But you want to make certain as a person, if you want to be on a show, that you carefully vet it before you even offer yourself, and make sure that not only that you're in alignment, that you can talk with that person, but does it make sense for you to invest the time on being in a show if it doesn't directly lead to what your ultimate goal is? Like, what is your ultimate goal? Is there a certain aspect of your business that you're trying to grow? Well, if so, then make sure that you're only on shows that are tied into that stream, that wheelhouse, if you will. Just because you can do these other things doesn't mean that you should be on those shows if you want to grow this other aspect, right? So we want to make sure that we're in alignment. That energy thing we were talking about, I do recommend listening and making certain that you jive with that person. My litmus test, I want to make sure that when I'm listening to that person, the question I ask is, would I like to sit in a cafe and have a cup with that person? And if the answer is no, for whatever reason, then I move on, because I want it to flow. I want it to be comfortable. And there's millions of podcasts out there. Okay. Now, they're not all active. They're not real good. I get that. But still, there are a lot of podcasts in whatever our industry is that are going to be in alignment. So make sure that you really resonate with them, and make sure that when you are proposing yourself to that host, that you start by letting them know what value you bring and why you feel you're in alignment. Now, if you have listened to the show, then if you can pull something more personal in and share that helps the host to know that you actually listened. Oh my gosh, I am so tired of people lying. Yes. I'm so tired, right?
I could give you many examples of that.
Oh my God. Like, right? You can tell when they say, I love your podcast. I'm a big fan. I listen to it all the time. And
keep up the great work or something. Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, they're trying to stroke my ego here, but there's nothing there that gives me any confidence that they've actually listened.
Exactly. Right. But when you say on episode 239, when Sally Jones was talking about using podcasting as a means to grow your business, she talked about this, but I like to come at it from the viewpoint of this, because I feel I can supplement what you already had on that show. I can add to it. Or maybe it's that personal connection. Like one of my clients, she made reference to a car accident she was in when she was like 18 years old that I didn't know that. I've known her for a while. I didn't know that, but it made sense because of the episode that she listened to where that host had talked about their own experience with a car accident. So it brings that together. This is relational marketing. So the more you can do to connect with that host, the better for everybody, so that you're more likely to get booked. Okay. And you're more likely to be the type of guest that they're going to really resonate with. And you also have that connection a little bit more by the time you actually have that interview. So there's just so many reasons to do that, but let them know what's in it for them.
Yeah. There's so much in what you've shared there. I mean, the key thing that I hear, and I can only endorse this as a podcast host who gets a lot of potential guests sending me proposals to come on the show, is
no, they're sending you pitches.
Pitches, yeah.
They're sending you pitches, yeah. I'm sending you proposals.
Is to do some research, work out, is this a good match for what I'm about? And then the other key thing that I think you said there that I'd like to highlight is the relational thing, is to sort of, how can I begin a relationship here? It's kind of marketing 101. It's okay, let's get to know one another first, and then let's figure out the next steps from there. And the next steps may be, hey, we're not a good match, right? And that's okay in business. That's okay in the podcasting space. Now, the other thing that I heard in all that, though, and here's a little tip for podcasters that might be listening in to this, is make it really easy because this actually saves you work. Make it really easy for people who look at your podcast and think, I'd love to go on that podcast as a guest, or an agency that says this is a potential podcast for my clients to send them to. Make it really easy for them to say, that's a good match or that's not a good match. It will save you a lot of work in the long term.
Absolutely. It's going to help you with people vetting your show. And can I toss something else out there? Because there is something. So I'm in the middle, right? I have a very unique situation in that I am looking at shows literally every day of my life with scrutiny. Okay. Because my clients are going to pay me to be on those shows that I'm going to propose. So I've got to make sure that the show is worth them paying for. So I always have to come from the viewpoint of what's the ROI? Does it make a lot of sense? Even if a person is not paying someone to book you, your time is valuable. You will never get that time back. So you do want to make sure that you vet things very well. One of the things that I see happen is the Apple of all, because there's so many different platforms, of course. I love looking at a show on Apple because at a glance on one page without having to scroll, I can see how many episodes there are. On the left-hand side, I can see the description of the show. I can see when the most recent interview was aired. I can see the 10 of them in one fell swoop. So I can see if, and you talked about consistency, if that host is consistent, or are there shows like all over the place? Okay. Because that speaks volumes about the professionalism of a host if they're inconsistent. And also make sure that they have guests, by the way. People, please don't spend time proposing yourself to a show if they don't even have
solo
guests.
Show.
Okay. Because believe me, this happens all the time. So you can ascertain all of that right from the get-go. Where there is a problem, though, is that sometimes it's not easy to ascertain with the hosts who do not utilize the first 3 lines of content in Apple Podcasts. That's a description of the episode. Now, I actually just looked today at a podcast of someone who is huge. And I looked at all 10 of them. Now, the title had the name of the guest, but the first 3 lines were the exact same 3 lines throughout the entire thing. So that tells me, A, that host is about promoting himself, not his guests. B, I can't ascertain by looking at that what his show's about because I can't tell what those guests are talking about. I can read the guest names, but I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know if it's about tiddlywinks or about, mushroom hunting. Like, I can't tell because it's not in that descriptive content. And I don't know that every host realizes that. I'm not a host. I don't know where this comes from. You would know that. I don't know how you control those first 3 lines, but I do know that it is precious real estate for a host to utilize that to A, bless your guest by helping them get visibility so someone will actually want to listen to that episode because they know what the episode is about, but also B, that it's helping with everything from searching, the SEO, search engine optimization, keywords, like all of that. People want to be able to look at that and be able to get a sense from those first 10 that show up what your show's about based on who your guests are. So if you want to have guests that are screening your show and they have some semblance of an idea of what your show's about, that is one area where there could be an upgrade, is look at that, log in, look at your how it shows up on that first page on Apple, and just get a sense for what it looks like. And I'm sure it applies to Spotify and everything. I like the white background. It's just easier for me to read Apple than Spotify.
There's a lot you can do there just to make that easy, and most of it is through the hosting, I guess. My understanding is that when I upload to the host, I give it a title, and I try to have a really meaningful title, so that even where the title only shows up, there's a little bit of information there. So it's the guest's name and what they talked about, essentially, what the topic was, and I do it in a way that it's almost like a call to action or a what I will learn from this episode in the title already, and then the description goes after that in most platforms that I'm aware of, and I'm guessing that that's what gets picked up by
that
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. And that, that speaks to the evergreen factor of podcast guesting, which is so powerful, is that you don't know when your episode's going to be listened to. So, like, we're recording this in November of 2023. It's entirely possible that someone might 3 years from now discover your show, which I suspect your show will still be going 3 years from now because you love this and you're good at it. But let's say 3 years from now, it's 2026. If anyone listening to this right now is in the year of 2026, thank you, because you scrolled down and you looked to see what other shows Jurgen has done, and he's got good descriptions. So it gives a person a reason to click on that and actually listen. And I don't know about you, Jurgen, but I've done this where I discover a really good show. Oh, shoot, it just happened yesterday. I listened to 4 podcast episodes from one show just yesterday because I went in to listen to one and I liked it enough that I went back and I looked at other ones. But I have even had a podcast years ago that was so good that I literally set it to start at episode 001 and play from reverse. So we have a lot of potential exposure, any of us who are guesting, to be discovered after the fact. Because once someone goes into a show, then if they like it, they're going to stay there. Again, that's why that valuable content on why someone would want to listen to those episodes. But also keep in mind that evergreen factor gives podcast guesting the power. This is where that digital footprint remains so strong. And we want to keep that in mind. So another thing that I'm going to suggest to everyone is that I've already said listen to the episode so you can make sure you're in alignment, right? After you listen to the episode, since it's fresh in your mind, do that host a solid and give them a rating and review. Don't just go in there and give them 5 stars. Take 4 minutes to write something about the show and submit it. Because if you are a guest on a show, anything you can do to help that show get more visibility, the better for you, because you're in the queue to be heard after the fact. And it just astounds me how many people don't seem to understand that it doesn't just benefit the host, but it benefits the guest long term for us to do everything we can to get exposure to your show and get it listened to. So those reviews do matter. Apple, apparently, I don't understand all the algorithms. You would know a lot more than me. I know, apparently, I've been told that like getting reviews on Apple doesn't matter as far as Apple's concerned, like how they're going to say, oh, you should listen, these are the top 20, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But what matters is people. It's human nature to look at reviews. I mean, if I want to go buy an air fryer from a local, store, I'll pull out my phone and go on Amazon and see what people have written about that model of that air fryer, and then I'll decide if I want to buy it at that store. It's no different with as far as in my opinion, Apple is the house of the reviews. It's the place. It's like the Amazon of, if you want to know if people are saying good things about a show, go to Apple and look at what people are saying on those reviews. Yes, there are bots that put out bogus reviews. Yes, you can tell when a host makes every guest do a review before they'll interview them. If you see a show where they have more reviews than they have episodes,
yeah, that's a sign.
Okay, so use common sense. I also know some amazing shows that don't have a lot of Apple reviews because the host didn't put effort into it, because they didn't realize it. So I'm not saying put a lot of weight on the Apple reviews when you are vetting a show. It's just one of the many signifiers to look at as to whether it's a good caliber show to be on. But you as a guest can help that show by taking the time to do a review. It's the least you can do for this host who is spending time and money to give you a platform to get your voice out there. So it just seems to make sense to me that everybody would do that.
Yeah.
So if y'all listening right now haven't done a review on Jurgen's show, please do that.
And I noticed that you did a review before we started out here, which I really appreciate.
Yes,
so thank you.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, it only makes sense, it's fresh. The other thing I do is I let the host know, because Apple has lost my reviews. So I spell check first, I drop it into Apple, then I take that content of what I just wrote and I send it to the host, and I tell them, hey, if Apple doesn't, put it in, let me know, because guess what? All I got to do is copy and paste it, and I can do it again. If I had to rewrite the review, no.
You've reminded me, I have had pictures, and I'm not quite sure what this is. I sort of, the cynic in me says this is a sneaky way to get attention. They've sent me a actual screenshot of an Apple review that they did about my podcast. And then they write the pitch to come on the show. And why I'm suspicious is the pitch was not very good, and it was not necessarily a good match. So they hadn't done a lot of other homework. And then I just sat on it for a while. Now, this has happened to me twice, and I sat on them for a while. And then I watched my Apple reviews, and I was looking out for this review that they'd screenshotted, and it never showed up. So I'm thinking that, because you can write out the review and not hit the send button, right? So you can write out the review, do a screenshot, and then not hit send. Now, that can happen. You can forget, I suppose, but it happened twice. And they were both sort of really, I'll say, pitches where it was all about me, the guest, not about what can I bring to this podcast.
Wow. Okay, so do you remember, did it look like they were reviews that had been submitted already, or were they still the edit field that they were screenshotting?
I think it was the edit field, which is what why why I was
Wow.
kind of really suspicious about it.
Well, that would be kind of
And-
crazy to take the time to put something in and then not
yeah,
hit submit.
it's sort of weird, isn't it?
And if it is a tit for tat, like I'm only going to hit send if you actually book
Yeah,
my
yeah.
person that I'm, that's just not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have not heard of that, of it not showing up. I do know
Yeah,
people will use an Apple review as a means to get your attention. And honestly, like it's been a dilemma for me because, and it was a little bit different with you and I because we were already in agreement that I was going to be on your show. But when I am doing a review and it's of a show, because sometimes I often actually do it for shows that my clients, I'm trying to get them on or they've been on, or as well as myself if I'm proposing myself. But if it's a show that I'm trying to get a client on and I haven't booked anybody yet, and I'm sharing that review with them, I do throw in the caveat, like, I swear, I am not doing this just to butter you up. But the truth is, I listened in order to vet your show for my client. So why wouldn't I do something with what I just heard and do you a solid and, give you this review? And I feel like people believe me. I feel like when you really are sincere,
Yeah.
the vast majority of the people are going to believe you
And
and
it
they're going
comes
to
through.
know.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing it per se, but I do know that there's value to it. Another thing that I'm always awkward about, and I'm just gonna, open it up here for you. my business mentor says open kimono time. Okay. So I have a lot of things that I do for every time that I'm on a show. I've got a whole spreadsheet of all these things that I make sure that I do. So the Apple review is one of them. And a whole host of other things. I won't go into all that detail, but one of the things that I like to do is I like to give a review, or not a review, but like a recommendation or a testimonial about a host on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is the only social sandbox that I play in, but I put a lot of time into LinkedIn, and it's a powerful platform for me to use in my business. Not a lot of people, not a lot of guests take the time to write a recommendation of a person that they did an interview with about how good of a podcast host they are. But if I do that on LinkedIn, then that shows up in your profile. So when people are following you, they're checking you out as a host, they're checking out, Flywheel Nation, like anything in your business, and if they're really vetting you and they go down to recommendations area, it really helps for you to have another recommendation in there. And it's one about you as a podcast host, because that speaks volumes about you as a person, your credibility, and if they are considering being on your show, about you as a host. So I do that. But I also will be asking you to do a review for me on LinkedIn about how I was as a guest. And I always struggle, like, should I review them first, do a recommendation first, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to ask them to do a recommendation for me? Are they going to feel obligated now because I just did this?
Yeah.
Or should I ask them first and then not ask them again, and maybe they do or maybe they don't, and then I do a recommendation on them? Like, I don't know. I'm conflicted with that all the time, but I really do want to give you a recommendation. And I really do want you to do a recommendation for me.
Yeah.
So how do we do that without it seeming inauthentic, right?
I mean, I open Kimono. I use templates in my process.
Oh, okay.
I have templates. Now, I talk a lot about being personal and relationship and so on, and my templates are structured in such a way that there's a lot of personal element to them. And I use them as a framework. I usually write some extra stuff in there, or so you'll experience this. There'll be a thank you note come out after the episode, which is a template. But there's actually an audio recording which will be me speaking to you personally. So that will go into the template.
Beautiful.
part of the template actually asks for a review, so I'll have to remember to remove that from your email.
Don't worry about it. I got you. I know.
But I ask for the review, and I think this is good practice just to ask, because if you don't ask, people may not give it.
They don't think about
and
it.
They don't think about it, or they forget and they move on. There's other stuff happening. I also, in the same kind of paragraph, say, if you'd like me to write you a review, let me know where you want that posted.
That's nice.
I basically ask for them to review me, but also offer to review them.
I love that.
And ask where they would like that. Because as a host, I mean, they can rate the podcast on Apple or on one of the other platforms. Doing a LinkedIn testimonial is going well above and beyond. But as the guest, I'm not really sure, because if they're not podcasters, and also to give them a review about how they performed on my show as a guest, I mean, that wouldn't be appropriate to write in their podcast review. So that's, I say, well, I'd love to write you a review. Let me know where you want me to do that.
Yeah, that's nice.
And the surprising thing is that very few people actually come back and take that up. I do have people that ask, that follow up even before I've sent the thank you email. They'll often send, as soon as we hang up, they'll send me an email saying something like, it was fun to be on your show, and could you write me a review or a testimonial on LinkedIn or something like that. So they'll ask, which is fine. But yeah.
It helps to have those testimonials. They, in particular, if you've got a speaker or podcast guesting page on your site, if you've got a one sheet, which is a media paper that we use to get people booked or get yourselves booked, it's valuable. Not everybody's on LinkedIn, so it really, but for me, if you are on LinkedIn and the person you are going to recommend is on LinkedIn, the value of having it on LinkedIn to begin with is that then it's attached to that profile forevermore. So it supports that person there, and then they can take that content and they can use it anywhere else. They can put it somewhere, on a flyer or, in their website, etc. But if you send it to them via email, they can't drop it in their LinkedIn profile. So I always like to start with LinkedIn, knowing that it can go to other places.
There. Yeah.
Now, I would recommend to anyone, your audience, if any of you are out there and you are using this as a marketing tool, and in particular, if you have your own show, do ask for those reviews and tell people what, if you're sending it like a post thing to a guest. I haven't seen your template yet, and I have no problem with templates. We use templates, but we massage them. We add stuff to it and we personalize it. So what I would say is, if it's not telling the person the benefit to them as to having that review, it's not just because they're doing you a favor, but that thing that I was talking about earlier, where it helps them get more visibility, because if the more your show grows, the more opportunities there will be for people to hear their episode down the road. Sometimes people are more willing to act if there's something in it for them. So I'm just kind of putting it out there.
Yeah.
And people can also use an excuse. Just say, hey, I heard this podcast interview from a podcast booking agent who said it's critical that I get more Apple reviews for my podcast, which in the long run is going to help you, former guest, get more visibility. Would you be willing to do a review on Apple? If you want to ask them for LinkedIn, you could do it throughout, right through that. But that's a completely different thing. That's about you as a host. Like we talked about, not the same thing as how great your show is. So they are different things, but still ask, because people don't necessarily think to do it automatically.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Now, we've talked a lot about preparing and what some of the best practices are to match up, identify podcasts, and then write or submit a good proposal, and focusing on providing value to that podcast host and to their audience. One of the other things, and I know you're very strong on this, is once the show's been recorded and published, what are the best practices after that? Now, I'd preface that and say, from the host's point of view, one of the best practices that I thought everybody did, and I learned after I did a lot of podcast guesting, I learned that not many people actually do it. Let the guest know that your episode's been published.
Oh.
When it publishes, not kind of, don't let them find out through Google search or something a few weeks later.
Yes.
So that would be my tip for best practice for a podcast host relative to your guests. But from the guest point of view, what are some of the best practices once you've been on the podcast? Now, we haven't talked about showing up as your best, but that's kind of the middle bit that I talk about as well. But we've talked about the preparation, the matching up, identifying the right podcast. So let's say you did show up as your best. You had a wonderful experience on the show, and then the show publishes. What's next?
Well, let's start with something even before the show publishes. So I actually would love to do a screenshot with you, if that's okay.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Okay, so now something's up with my screenshot thing. It seems to take a little while, so you're going to have to smile still for a moment, okay? I don't know why it's doing this, so we're just going to smile. Wait, that didn't work. Hang on. There, got it. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, something
so there was
changed
that
with
pregnant
my screen.
Pause there.
Yes, exactly.
Now, luckily, our platform, our podcast recording platform, actually does snippets after the fact.
So I love that.
I love that.
So here's my process, and I go to the extreme, but hey, I would rather. For me, it's about quality versus quantity. If I'm not going to do it right, there's no point in me being on an episode, because I want to get the most bang for my buck, and I want to get you the most bang for your buck too. So it's all about visibility. So I will be taking this screenshot, and I am going to be sharing on LinkedIn. I had an awesome time with Jürgen today. It was a great podcast interview. I can't wait for that episode to come out. Meanwhile, here's a link to his show. Check it out. Give it a listen. I think it's a great show. I might even link to some of my previous, like Rusty. Maybe I'll find Rusty's episode and I'll share that. Like, if you want to listen to a great one, check out Rusty, right? 411. Okay, there we go. Great number. So, I will say something along the lines to encourage them to listen to your show now. And I change it every time I say something different. I never know. I don't use a template for that. I probably should. But it's something along the lines of, check out a show, do them a solid, give them a rating, a review. And once it's out, I will share it with you. So I do that. I do the LinkedIn recommendation about you. I will be asking you to do one. I will write you a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note. And I'm going to send it all the way to Victoria. It might be, I don't know how long before it gets to you, but the effort will be there. I will make a note of all of these things. And then there's other areas where I share it. So when it airs, and you're going to give me that content because you're very thorough. And I can't tell you how many hosts do not get the aired interview to the people, or get them any kind of assets to work with. The more you spoon feed someone, and you can create a template, just like what you've done, create a template so that you're always going to include these certain things. Yeah. The more you put in there, the easier it is for that person to share. If you make it hard for them, they're not going to do as much. So if you've got visuals, if you've got links to different platforms, like personally, when I share an episode on LinkedIn, I do like to share quite a few of the different platforms. I prefer to link to the host site there because I want them to get visibility on their page, their actual website. So that's always my preference. Whatever has the best show notes is usually the best place to do it. Okay, so I will link to that, but I'll also find if they have a YouTube one, I'll share the YouTube link. If they've got it on Spotify, if they got it on Apple, maybe Google Podcast, some of the key ones, and I'll drop links in there too, because everybody's got their favorite platform that they work from. So I'll share all of that once we have it, and I will encourage people to listen. I will always tag you. When you talk about also not knowing, sometimes, well, it just happened today. Actually, this one was a mistake because this person usually does tag people, but I often see people sharing their podcast episodes. The hosts, the hosts do this all the time, and they don't tag the guest. And the reason why is because they've got an assistant who's using a third-party app.
Yeah.
And in the world of LinkedIn, you can't tag people if you go outside of LinkedIn. The only way to tag people is you have to schedule it through LinkedIn in order to tag them. So it's either you do that, you take the extra time and do it direct through LinkedIn, which I do recommend, and then you schedule it, or you have a note to yourself, the date and time that it's going to be published, and then you got to go back in LinkedIn, then you got to edit it and add the tag. So why not just do it through LinkedIn to begin with?
Yeah.
So, but if you don't tag people, they can't respond.
That's a really valuable tip. That's actually really simplified our work process ever since LinkedIn allowed scheduling of posts.
Oh yes, yes. It's much better. Although it's you can't edit it afterwards. So I've discovered that. I've scheduled something just today, and then I wanted
before it publishes. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't seem to figure out how to I've scheduled it. The only thing is if I just cancel it, start all over again, and I'm not willing to do that. But the tagging is important because its engagement is key, and engagement is important right from the get-go. So the sooner you start engaging, so watch for every day, go into your notifications tab and see if you have been tagged. Now, depending upon your settings, you may get emails letting you know, or maybe you got all that shut off and you need to be proactive yourself and look at the notifications tab on LinkedIn every day. Now, I can't speak to the other platforms, but on LinkedIn, it'll tell you anytime someone has tagged you. Engage. It's really it breaks my heart when I share every episode that my clients have been on. I always tag the guest and I tag the host. And a lot of times I'll even tag their podcast page on LinkedIn if they have one, or their business page on LinkedIn. Like, I go out of my way to get extra exposure for that host. And then all they'll do is just like give me a little thumbs up. That's it. They don't even respond. And I will point blank say, thank you, Sally, for having my client on your show. After I've already tagged them and shared a bit about the show, it seems like they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're missing an opportunity for engagement with new eyes if they don't respond. So if instead they give me a thumbs up and then they respond with a comment, and they say, "You're welcome, Anastasia. So glad that, you had Nancy Geary on our show. She was a great guest. It's our pleasure to work with you," or something. And I don't know, but respond to me, tag the guest, or respond to the guest, tag me. The more tagging love we can have in there, and commenting and responding and engaging, the higher the rankings, it's going to pop up in the visibility algorithms of LinkedIn.
Every comment and every conversation that happens pushes the post higher up the ranking.
And doesn't a host want that? Don't they want to be seen? Doesn't a guest want to be seen? Isn't that why we're doing this, is to be visible? So it's like we're going almost to the finish line, and then we're just walking. And that is a crime. It's just a crime. And this comes back to that in the very beginning, the getting it right. It's the strategy. There is a strategy but it's also always coming from the space of blessing other people. Bless other people, engage with them, help them get more visibility. The fact that we get more visibility in the process is just the cherry on the top. But really, from the viewpoint of that integrity, I think makes all the difference in the world. So there's a lot of these different steps. I also, Innovation Women is an organization that I'm a part of. It's an online visibility platform for women speakers, which I highly recommend to any women that are speaking and wanting to get out on more stages, both paid and unpaid. But they have an email that they do a monthly roundup of where have our speakers been. And every time, like I will be, after yours is aired, I will be sharing it on that platform through my profile. And so you will see when this comes out, this little blurb, Anastasia was on the Innova.Buzz podcast, and it will link to this episode. That email is going to go out to 25,000 people. So you will get exposure, as will I. I also will backlink to this episode on my website. So on my website, each of my clients I have a profile for, but I have one for myself as well. And it's all the different places where I have been a guest, and I've got live links to it. So that allows someone who's looking at me and considering me as a guest to be able to hear me and vet me and decide if they want to have a cup with me in a cafe somewhere, right? But it's also good for you because it's a backlink and it's a hit.
That's
for
right.
you, Jurgen, and your show, Innova.Buzz, because I backlinked there. And I will always let you know that. So it does help, excuse me, for the host to know that you've done these things. If you have a newsletter, and share where you have spoken, share what episodes you've been on as a guest, because then you're also getting more visibility for those hosts that have, hosted you and let you use their platform. But it also lets everybody know on your e-list that you actively do this. So always ask them, do you know of any podcast that you feel I'd be a great fit for? Do you know of any groups or organizations that are looking for a speaker that speaks about the topics that I cover? Ask, because same thing like asking for reviews, people don't do it automatically.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's one more place. So these are all tactics to help you bless that host, but also to get more visibility and to get more engagements, more invitations to be on shows, to be booked as a speaker, etc.
Yeah,
So those are just a few things.
I love all of this. It's almost like couple of years ago, I did a short audio series on our process for podcasting, and I turned it around saying, what does this mean if you're a podcast guest and you want to be a guest on podcasts, and how do you do that? And it's actually a 12-step process, and the last 3 steps are after you've done the show. And a lot of what you've talked about here is, I actually talk about a lot of those things, and I say it's not once you've done the show and hung up the recording, whilst one of the big benefits of podcast guesting is that you don't have the work of editing the show and uploading it and writing the show notes and all the other things that we're going to do now as the host. You don't have all that, but it's not over. It's not over because there's still lots to do. And one of the things that I'm very strong on, and you've touched on it a few times here, is continuing to build on that relationship, because now that you've invested time in having a conversation, it's like a touch point in a relationship that's started. And why not invest in that relationship to keep going? Because who knows what will come out of that.
Yeah, it's relationship marketing 101. Another thing I always recommend is that if people are on LinkedIn and you use LinkedIn, that if you go to that host and you find their profile page and you click on that notification bell. So just so you know, on anyone's profile, if you go and you look underneath where their banner is, there's a bell there. And if you click on that, then any post that that person does is going to pop up in your notifications. So this way you can start engaging with that host even before you're on the show. You can be seeing things that they share. You can comment. You can, give it a thumbs up, reshare things, especially if it's someone that you really, this can be a tactic to get on a show too. So again, there's that fine line. I don't want to seem like we're abusing, like buttering somebody up, but it is a way to get their attention is you start engaging with them so they kind of know who you are. And they see that you're a giver, that you share, you respond. And then when you are proposing yourself as a potential guest, you're not a stranger to them because they've seen your name and they know, you've just in essence shown that you're visible. So there's a pretty good indication that after the episode airs that you're going to be visible with that as well. So that does help a host be more open to it. One thing I did forget to say, when you are making those personalized proposals that we were talking about, because again, we're talking about how you can be of value to the show, it's totally okay and actually recommended that you also say where you're going to share it and how you're going to share it. Just so you know, my policy is every episode that I am on, when it airs, I will share it on these platforms. Now, if you have a large reach in any area, point out the number, including to my, 72,000 Instagram followers.
Yeah.
But maybe your e-list only has 300 people. So you'll say, and my newsletter. You don't have to say my newsletter is 300. Just look at how you can let that host know that you're going to share it, where you're going to share it, and give them a sense of what your reach is, because that does help.
Yeah.
If you're vetting somebody and they've got a huge reach, you might be more interested in having them, in particular if you've got more potential guests than you know what to do with. Doesn't mean you're going to take a crappy guest. I know you wouldn't do that. But if you got two people that are on par with each other, one has more reach than the other, you might choose to go with the one with more reach, and that would honestly make more sense.
Yeah, so many great tips and ideas for best practice of following up after the show is recorded, and of course, all of these promotional things do serve the podcast host and that podcast. But as you pointed out, it comes back to you as a guest and making sure that your particular episode is much easier to discover and has a longer life cycle, if you like.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm sort of looking at the time we could go on talking podcasting and best practice, and we haven't even talked about, I have a whole section on how do you show up as your best on the day for the interview? What preparation do you do? Once you're accepted, what preparation do you do, and how do you show it, and so on?
Oh
so maybe
gosh.
we do another episode.
All right. I'm down. I'm down.
I think I do want to cover our buzz round, which is our innovation round. It's the same 5 questions I ask of every guest, and the idea is you'll give us some really short, insightful answers that will inspire the listener to go and do something awesome right now, today, as a result of your answer. So you all set?
I'm ready.
Excellent. So the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Oh, to be more innovative, for me, it's all about coming from that viewpoint of no matter what you do, be creative, but also bless the other people. What's in it for them in anything that you do and how you show up, because that is innovative. Not everybody does that. So many people do things that are self-serving, and it's pretty evident to everyone around them. So be that person, that innovator that's going to come from a viewpoint of what can I do for that other person or for those people. And I feel that that's going to be really helpful in that regard. Yeah,
that's great advice. And you've shared lots of examples of that throughout the conversation today. One of the things that I find many people struggle with in that regard is they can They can put themselves into this position of, okay, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to take a mindset of, or bring a mindset of, what can I do to contribute to your platform? But they have an expectation of what that will bring back.
Right.
And if that expectation is not met, they're kind of disappointed. And I found if you approach it beyond that, okay, what can I do to enhance your platform? What can I contribute to your audience? If you enhance that with, I have no expectations, it makes such a huge difference.
It takes the pressure off to not having an attachment to the outcome.
Yeah.
It takes the pressure off. And
paradoxically,
yeah.
Usually there's some great stuff happens as a result when you approach it like that.
Exactly. That's just it. It's either people are going to resonate, they're going to buy, they're going to sign up, they're going to follow up with you. Like, it's either going to happen or it's not. We can't force that.
Yeah.
We can't force that. And people, again, it's energy. It's energy and how people make us feel. Maya Angelou talks about that, right? That whole saying about, it's not what you do that matters. It's how you make people feel. And I just think that that's really important. And when I think of speaking, a lot of times, especially platform marketing speakers who are speaking to grow their business, they're going at it from this viewpoint of, I've got to nail this, because if I don't nail it, I get nothing for this, right? I'm not getting paid to speak. And that pressure can cause them to choke. It can cause them to not do as good of a presentation. If they can go at it from the viewpoint of not having an attachment to the outcome, but again, how can I be of value? How can I make certain that these people, especially in the speaking world, because they don't get to just get up and walk away, was it worth their time to sit there and listen to me? I hope so. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that it was, because you can't get that time back. So for anybody who's still listening to us, this has been a long, long message. But thank you. It means the world to me to know that you're here, because hopefully this has been of value. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Oh my gosh. The best thing that I do is I continually learn from other people. I am like a dry sponge. I listen all day to podcasts, books, programs, other people that do things similar to me. I will watch their stuff. I will connect with them. I will learn with them. I'll meet with them, and we talk and we collaborate. And I try to always be in a space of just being willing to change and do something different based upon what I learned tomorrow, because what I know today is different than what I knew a month ago, certainly a year ago. So I can only imagine what it's going to be like a year down the road. So innovate. Continue to learn and flow.
And
right?
There's so many opportunities to do that, and you've certainly touched on many of those. All right. Now, favorite resource of yours?
Oh my gosh. Oh, really? Just one? Oh, okay. If I have to say favorite resource, I would probably come back to Innovation Women. For women speakers. And a few good men. Okay. So nothing against you men at all. This is just a visibility platform to help women speakers get on more stages. That's what it's really about. So men are definitely welcome, but the focus is for the women. It is an incredible community, and it's kind of a no-brainer for any woman speaker to be a member of them. So I do highly recommend it. In fact, if we can get that in the show notes, I'd love to get.
I was just going to say, we'll put a link in the show notes.
I have made incredible connections with women in the community, whether you're brand new to speaking or a very experienced professional speaker. There's room in that space. It's collaborative. It's just a powerful network. So
Hmm.
it's hard because I have a lot of resources I refer to, but that would be, I guess, the top of my list right now.
Okay. Yeah. And we will include that in the show notes.
Thank you.
So, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Oh, but I'm going to be honest, it's not always easy. We do
That's
our
why I asked the
best.
question, because I'm trying to
So
figure it out.
yeah. So we, on our end, from our agency perspective and staying on top with our clients, we do most of our communicating via email. And so it's more a matter of continuing to track with them and communicate with them. And sometimes, if I feel I need to maybe suggest an upgrade for them in a certain area or help them to understand something a little bit better, a lot of times I'll do a screencast and I'll
Mhm.
show them things so that they can understand. Because especially in this podcasting world, for some of them, it's new. And they don't understand some of these nuances, and they might be missing opportunities. So I like to I watch them. I subscribe to their e-list, so I see what they're sending. I follow them. I click the notify bell on all LinkedIn, so I can see what they're doing, and then that way I can kind of track how they're showing up and representing themselves and sharing previous episodes. If I notice, say, that they didn't tag the host, then I will bring that to their attention and remind them, like, you, my dear client, are missing exposure because you didn't tag this host, and you could have gotten exposure to all of Jurgen's incredible community if you had just involved him. So you probably don't know how important tagging is. And so now I'm going to explain that to you. So I do a lot of keeping people on track and kind of pulling my consulting services in the same time.
Yeah.
I give a lot of unsolicited advice.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot of communication there, but I like that you kind of use a lot of education as an approach to help people understand, because you've mentioned this a few times. People want to know why. So if I'm asking for a review, for example, for my podcast, if I can
Right.
give them a why that is meaningful to them. So obviously they
Yeah.
know why I want the review, what it will do for me, but if I can give them a why as to how it benefits them.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, it's not that anybody doesn't want to help or doesn't want to be supportive. They just don't know. It's ignorance. It's not understanding. It's not understanding the industry, but even, I hate to even say that, because there are people who really know the industry well, but they don't have, dare I say, people skills? I don't know. I call it Marmie's etiquette, because my granddaughters call me Marmie, and I'm always careful of the word etiquette, because sometimes people think that it's a little outdated and maybe they feel like they're going to get their hands smacked or something like that. Best practices is the more safer thing to say, but it is etiquette. It really is etiquette in how to treat people. Do unto others. I mean, just that simple golden rule. Imagine if I was a host, what would I want that host to do? Imagine if I was the guest, what would I want that guest, so, or vice, just reverse that. But you know what I mean? So it's that, what would the other person, what would I be asking for if I was that person on the other side of things? And I think that can be really valuable. And it's just that people they don't realize it. They don't see the power of it. They don't understand the missed opportunities. And honestly, it breaks my heart to hear people say, oh yeah, I tried podcast guesting. I was on
Didn't
22
work.
different shows over a 3-month period, and I didn't get a single thing from it. And then the moment I start asking those questions, like, well, what shows were you on? Were you really aligned? Did you listen to the shows? Were they high caliber shows? Did you share it? Did you make sure that the show is the kind of show that shares it? Did you have a good call to action? Did you have a way for people to reach out to you? Did you give them a reason to reach out? Like, all these things, and they miss it. And they miss those extra things that you talked about afterwards. It's not that I'm buttering you up. I want to have a long-term relationship with you. Okay, so this is all part of that
And
long-term relationship.
yeah,
And guess what? You're going to refer people to me. You're going to meet some other podcast hosts at some event or someone like that, and my name's going to come up.
Yeah, and we talked before about another episode because we've got so much other stuff we could cover.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've had lots of people come back on the show for various reasons. Now, sometimes I've reached out to them and I say, I noticed you're starting up a new initiative, or I noticed you've changed business direction. This happened a lot in COVID because people were forced to change. So they had and I reached out to some people that I thought, wow, that's really innovative what they've done with their business, because they really were hit hard by COVID and had some challenges, and so they've changed. And I reached out to them. I said, hey, can you come on? Let's talk about this. What did you do? How did you learn some more there? And so keeping that relationship alive opens up the possibility of actually coming back as a repeat guest on that show.
Yes. Yep.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right. Last question of the buzz round. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Wow. Be you. I mean, be authentically you, because every one of us are different. We're all those snowflakes, right? No two are exactly alike. So when we can take what it is that is so uniquely us and be loud and proud about being that uniqueness or of ourselves, that is how we differentiate ourselves, whatever that might be. So, yeah, that's
Fantastic.
I don't think I can add to that.
Yeah, well, it's
just be you.
It's kind of an obvious answer, but I guess this comes out of this idea of there's this balance that we all strive for, I suppose, in finding people that we admire and that we want to learn from and that we want to emulate or model, but at the same time not losing our own authenticity. So, yeah, that kind of balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round, Anastasia. This has been fabulous, as has been the whole conversation. Now, where can people find out more about you, about Access Speakers, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Well, the easiest thing is just to go to a page, and I recommend that everybody have a page like this. And you would just go to my business web address. Basically, it's just accessspeakers.biz, B-I-Z/thank you. Now, excuse me, that is a published but hidden page. So you have to have the URL to go in there, but it allows me to have a place that's evergreen that I can continually put content in there. I'm taking a little more time to share about it because I want your listeners to understand that they can do the same thing themselves.
The process
so if you
as
go
well.
to accessspeakers.biz/thank you, everything is there as far as how you can reach out to me. My only social sandbox, as I share, is LinkedIn. So if you're interested in connecting there, I would love that. Please introduce yourself. Otherwise, I might not accept because I'm in it for the relationships. But I have a Q&A that I do every month for free, and I would be happy to gift any of your people a 15 to 20 minute mini consultation. So I've got a little thing where they can sign up to get an ebook, and they can just send that through. And if they want to connect with me and have that 15, 20 minutes, I'm happy to do that as well. But that one spot is where all my content is. And so if you're hearing this in 2026, this page should still be active, but it's probably going to be some different content.
Excellent. That's a really great idea. And I have lots of guests that come on and they answer that question with a whole link of different things. And particularly, I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm driving. I do a lot of commuting.
Exactly.
And so I kind of, by the end of it, I thought, okay, which one was it? And I've completely forgot. And of course, I'm not in a position to write anything down. So having just one page and a page that you can update continuously. So if you decide, well, I actually want people to go somewhere else now, you just update that link on that page or whatever you've embedded.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on a new, CTA, a call to action. I'm basically going to have a different opt-in piece that is going to be much better than my old ebook, but done is better than perfect. At least I've got something in there for now, and then I will continue to improve. So.
Excellent. Wonderful. And of course, we'll have a link to that in the show notes,
Yes, thank you.
accessspeakers.biz/thank you. See how easy it is to
Yay.
remember too. All right. So
Awesome.
thanks so much for sharing your insights so generously with us today. I've really enjoyed that. Now, I'd like to wrap up with just one question. What action would you like our listener to take out of today's conversation? Because it's sort of nice to listen to this podcast. And if you're still listening now, we really appreciate the fact that you've been with us for, what is it? Oh, an hour and 20 minutes already. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. I also like to have them actually do something that makes a difference in their lives. So what action do you recommend?
Okay. So making a difference in their lives. I also believe in making a difference in other people's lives. And I believe that everybody's got a message of some type that's of value. So if I would leave everyone with one thing, is use your voice. You know, whether you want to use, say, podcast guesting and or speaking, but in particular podcast guesting, whether you choose to go down that path and use that as part of a marketing strategy or not. Maybe that's not what you feel is the highest and best use of your time or doesn't interest you. But maybe you know about something else that you have a passion for, that other people knowing about that could benefit from it. Get out there and do it. You can get out there and talk on podcasts and share your passion, your expertise, and get that message out there. Maybe it's a nonprofit. Maybe there's some, again, I think, I can't remember if it was here or not that I mentioned. So I have a type 1 son, type 1 diabetes. So I could be on podcast talking about what it's like to be the mother of an adult type 1 son who doesn't take good care of his blood sugars. You know, I could share that, you know, those types of things. I could do that. And we have a beautiful medium that allows that. The podcasting world, this is why I love it so much more than the speaking world, to be completely honest, because there's so much more variety and opportunities and ease. That the barrier of entry is much lower in the sense that people can get on more shows if they just want to get the message out there. So if you've got something that you can be sharing and you're not sharing it, I feel that you're doing the world a disservice. So use your voice. I mean, it is the only thing that has affected change. And it can be small change or it can be big change. And sometimes all we need to do is be that drop, that one little drop in that puddle, and that ripple effect that goes out and affects other people. Every one of us has something of value to share.
Yeah. And
just
also
share it.
Also, I've been reflecting on this a lot lately, is again letting go of the expectations. So whatever it is that you might share today doesn't have to be world changing or world shattering or whatever. It's just, okay, I'm just going to share openly about this. I've learnt this, and share it, and no expectations. And you'll be surprised at the difference that could make to somebody else's world.
Right? Just like the starfish.
Yeah.
Makes a difference in the one. Just the one that you're tossing out there makes a difference to that one. That's all we need, is one person to be affected.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Anastasia. This has been really great. Now, please do stay in touch. I've really enjoyed this, and yeah, all the best.
Me too. Me too. It's been an honor and a pleasure.